or would you prefer the other one?
Hello, Jordan Sheridan, live Status Coup. Sorry I'm late. I was walking my dog, and this dog really has some behavioral issues. Seems to like lunging at people, all ages. I don't know why, but she sees someone on a bike, she lunges at them. She just lunged at an old lady. And I told her, you're going to lunge at the wrong person, and they're going to really do some damage on you, Millie. But that delayed me for a few minutes because she keeps lunging. But uh, ahead of time, I am not Donald Trump on cocaine before the debate with him sniffling. But if you hear me sniffling, I don't know what it is, a cold, wicked allergies. I don't know, but I am stuffed like a turkey. So excuse me, Steve. How are you doing in these trying times? You know, everyone, I'm seeing all these, what's it called? Substack pieces and tweets from liberals saying, take care of yourself, take care of your mental health in these trying times. I'm like, where were you before Trump won? Things were awful then. But how you doing?
I'm doing okay, man. Speaking of which, I'm watching the same exact thing. I've taste tested the Blue Sky app to see what life is like over there. And by the way, follow me, damn it. I'm austerity is murder.
I'm on Blue Sky as well at Jordan Sheridan.
I'm following you though. The difference is I'm following you.
Oh, I didn't know you were on. I'll have to.
I did, and I'm. There's a partial regret at this moment because I see the Mark Cuban post go up, and it goes, guys, let's make sure that we don't do anything disagreeable on here, because, and I'm thinking to myself, you guys got the Democrats trying to make fighting for the people of Gaza out to be anti-Semitism and make it criminal to speak on this stuff, and you want to tidy up everyone's speech. I wonder what would happen if Mr. Garrison, the old days, Mr. Garrison of the Liberator, were told that he had to pipe down for what, right? People just don't realize the role of the agitator.
Are you going to explain who Mr. Garrison of the Liberator is? Or
William Lloyd Garrison, the guy who was the one that was the ultimate in just in your face, end slavery. It is cancer, toxic. I mean, this guy, you've got elementary schools across America named after him because he was one of the few that didn't let anybody tone police him, didn't allow any shit libs to tell him, well, you're being a little extreme. He was like, fuck your incrementalism. We're getting rid of slavery, and that's that. And that's the way we should be about most things. So anyway, but I get the impression it wasn't the forum for that.
You mean it wasn't Abraham Lincoln that led the charge on slavery? That's what I was told.
I don't think so. I think it was guys like William Lloyd Garrison. And I think it's important to recognize those folks, because I know for a fact that if I had to model myself after somebody, let it be a guy that was tried to be, assassinated a legitimate 150 different times. People going with the hanging rope to lynch him because he was speaking truth to power. Let me be that guy.
The last thing I'll say before we get to the main topics, I think I feel mixed on Blue Sky or alternatives to X in this regard. We already have too many Team Blue and Team Red corners, whether it be Fox News versus MSNBC and CNN. So I don't really love the thought of just like a social media platform that's really for like, triggered liberals, which is Blue Sky. There might be more people than just triggered liberals, but from what I saw, it seems to be a lot of exiles who left Twitter that are more kind of rah-rah Democratic Party. On the other hand, I mean, honestly, and you work hard to build up your Twitter following. I worked hard, and I didn't really love being on Twitter, but I had to help Status Coup and get the stuff out. But Twitter right now is just like, it's just turned into like a right-wing fever dream. I mean, my whole feed is people that I don't even follow, and it's just one account that I've never heard of after another pushing, a fever dream of this mixed bowl of Elon, RFK, Kash Patel, and it's just horrible. And apparently they're losing 14%, 15% of users per month. So, good on you, Elon, for driving it into the ground, if that was your intention. So I do think there should be alternatives to Twitter. I'm just not, yeah, in a perfect world, it would be wonderful to have a platform that's not as much of a cesspool and people fighting, but that's just the internet. There's nothing really you could do about that.
Right.
But I don't like that, Twitter is now right wing and Blue Sky is like the left wing alternative or liberal alternative. We need something that's less of a team politics, red hat versus blue hat, and just a town square. Anyway, smash the like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Reminder, we broke a major story last week that, of course, the mainstream media is ignoring. We're continuing to push it. It's on our Substack, which you haven't subscribed. Please subscribe. You can subscribe for free. StatusCoup.substack.com. Steve, I don't know if you saw it.
Oh yeah.
One day, in the old days, maybe this would be on the front page. And pretty soon I'm going to start naming names and leaking emails I have. Because I had a fucking conversation with a reporter from the Associated Press that would blow your mind. I sent him the story, which, if you missed it, was we broke that we got audio of an EPA official on the ground in East Palestine, Ohio, which is filled with sick people, just casually saying, yeah, Norfolk Southern lied. The air wasn't safe. Just casually saying, yeah, maybe the EPA, should have warned the residents about potential health risks. Yeah, there's too many scientific uncertainties about people's long-term health risks. Basically just 100%, 180, contradicting everything that the EPA, Norfolk Southern told the public. And when I say the public, I mean sick people in Ohio and Pennsylvania. They're very sick still, and nobody will cover it. And I emailed the Associated Press guy who writes about Norfolk Southern, the train derailment a little bit. He didn't cover the last story we broke about the EPA hiding that they detected toxic vinyl chloride. They just didn't tell anyone. He told me at the time, yeah, I confirmed your story's right. So I said, great. When should I expect it on the Associated Press? Because you certainly have a lot more traction than little old Status Coup. Never reported it. So I sent this one to him. I said, I know you didn't have time to report the last one. He said, oh, I mentioned that in another story. I said, oh, I'm glad you mentioned it at the bottom of the story that the EPA, who has been lying about not finding a highly toxic cancerous gas on the ground. I'm glad you found time to mention it at the bottom of your story that they actually did find it. And by the way, I've looked at his stories. I don't think he did mention it. And he still hasn't covered this, but I digress. Please, we got to get more traction on these stories if we're going to wake up the masses. It's as simple as that. So speaking of something that's being memory holed and forgotten by the media, not that they covered it that much anyway. Obviously, Trump's, merry-go-round freaks and ghouls and alleged sex predators is the big story in the media right now that he's filling up his cabinet. We're going to talk about his Wall Street filled treasury contenders later. But what an answer from Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, who was Hillary Clinton's, go-to foreign policy wonk. Seems to be another one of these guys who's never met a war he's never loved, never met brown people he's not willing to slaughter. And he was asked, I believe on PBS, they very tepidly asked him, do you have any trepidation that Biden's legacy will kind of be genocide? They didn't use that term, but they were kind of gingerly asking it. I mean, this answer was, you're either completely removed from reality or just a total psychopath. It might be both. Let's play this.
Let me ask a question about legacy. Are you concerned that one of your legacies will be facilitating the way Israel has fought in Gaza that has killed tens of thousands of women and children?
The U.S. has taken a very clear position since this war began, which is that Israel had a right to defend itself after the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. The U.S. also, over the course of the past year, has made a massive difference in terms of whether there would be widespread famine in Gaza or not widespread famine, in terms of working with the Israelis to try to minimize civilian harm over the course of the months of the conflict. I do believe that us standing up for Israel in its hour of need, at a moment when its enemies were descending upon it, has made a major difference for the good from the perspective of the United
States. Just
straight-faced.
Yeah. Before we get to, by the way, his wife, I don't know what the results were. She was just running for office. They're worth $20 million, I think. And there was a viral clip. Sorry, Colin, I should have asked you to get this, where she was debating and calling for, we need middle class tax cuts. And her opponent was like, it was an Asian woman. I forget her name. Said, "What do you mean middle class tax cuts? You're not middle class. You probably don't even do your grocery shopping. You're worth $20 million." It was just priceless. Anyway, before we get to that revolting answer, let's just correct the record for a minute. He said, avoid widespread famine. I don't know if he's paying attention to the same region. I mean, there's just a few. This is from July. UN experts declare famine has spread throughout the Gaza Strip. That's from July. Not that, the UN is always correct, but I mean, there's been plenty of other agencies and studies finding what famine has hit. Cindy McCain, the widow to warmonger John McCain, she's now ambassador to something. She's been rightly, screaming about this, that the people are starving and there's widespread famine. Then you look at this from October, over 1.8 million in Gaza face extreme hunger. And then more recently, this is just a few days ago, warned of imminent famine in northern Gaza. Speakers in Security Council urge immediate ceasefire, sustained aid. So he's just lying that we helped stave off widespread famine. It's just not true. Just like there's been, horrible famine in Yemen, which we also helped slaughter. But I mean, I'm not a body language expert. I'm certainly not a psychologist, but he seems pretty stone cold on that answer. And one can't help but think, I mean, it's simply just the Zionist donor order speaking there.
It's sick. One of the things I'm almost shocked that we didn't find a way to pull into this is that I think it was a week ago, if that, not even, that they admitted they hadn't let food trucks in at all. And they finally let one in. And as soon as the people went to get the fucking food, they bombed them. They bombed them as they were getting the food. That should have been front page news. It should have been everywhere. But alas, it's not even talked about. You talk about, let me throw Blue Sky back under the bus again. Talk about a place where that wouldn't get mentioned. Guarantee Blue Sky probably has, hey, that's controversial. We can't talk about that here on Blue Sky. Horrible.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. And you know what? Honestly, it's very possible. It's very possible that Trump, when he becomes president, Netanyahu kind of as a fuck you to Biden, Democrats might end the war. It would probably still mean some type of occupation of Gaza. It seems they're already signaling they're going to occupy at least the northern part of Gaza. But even if the day-to-day slaughter and killings end, let's be clear. I mean, this has long-term effects and long-term deaths. I mean, this is not the same thing as 9/11, but, as experts have told me, just a toxicologist we've been speaking to, the number everyone knows is almost 3,000 Americans died on 9/11, but 4,000 have died since then from cancer and other things. So even when the bombs in real time stop, how many are going to die of famine, malnutrition, succumb to wounds they suffered, et cetera, et cetera. And the short-term bombs might end, but that doesn't mean the actual long-term consequences of endless genocide end. And it just, to me, that answer, when Israel was in, what did he say? When it was in, need,
moment of need, as its enemies descended upon it.
Right. Well, I mean, one could say, okay, without going back, 100 years, should they have responded? Yeah, a country can respond, but what's the response? You help them in their moment of need in the short term. You sent relief, you sent, continued to fund the Iron Dome, whatever people think of that. But there's moment of need, and then there's just, hey, let's just kill as many Arabs as we can. let's, because in Israel, there's also been a long-term concern about the Arab population outpacing the Jewish population. So let's have an excuse here to kill off as many of them as we can. And I think this is not just a soulless, immoral answer, but I think there's long-term damage here to the Democrats, because I don't know if a lot of these young people are coming back to the Democrats for a lot of reasons, but this was one of the top ones. This was a line in the sand for a lot of people. I did a video a couple days ago. Yes, inflation and all those things mattered and seemed to be number one. I think Gaza could have been, ranked as number 2 or 3. And you look at Michigan, Trump won 50,000 votes in Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck. Those are the heavily Arab communities. He only won the state by 80,000. So 50,000 of that 80,000 was Arabs voting for him. I'm not going to knock him. It was a revolt vote. That's what it was. They voted as a revolt, and not even a protest vote, like a, hey, fuck you, we're not voting for you when you're killing us. Trump's obviously not going to be better, but when people are hurt, reeling, angry, desperate, they tend to sometimes do those things. But it's just remarkable to me. And what that answer shows me, obviously it doesn't matter now because the Democrats are in the wilderness. There doesn't seem to be any signs that this is going to change at all, Democrats or Republicans. I think they're going to double down on their support for Israel. And you have to wonder why, other than that's where the money comes from. Not directly Israel, but a lot of the donors are Zionists and pro-Israel.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I Kate Willett, who's a comedian and I think a DSAer from New York City, she was out there talking the other day about how she feels like the fracture has finally happened, that the left and liberal, the leftist and liberals are completely now incompatible. They can't. There is no unity. It's not that there never was unity. There was just, you vote for us, and a lot of dumbasses said, oh yeah, we got to do this. What do you want, Trump? But in reality, when you hear someone like her, who typically always finds a mental gymnastics way of finding a way back to voting for a Democrat, I was pretty bold for somebody who I consider to be relative vote blue, no matter who. She's definitely one of the team. And to see her kind of pivoting from that position was, I think, rather stark.
Right. And, also, you got to wonder, there's going to be a lot of protests popping up soon. Trump is lining up his administration with a who's who of awful. By the way, as I speak, he just named Dr. Oz to run Medicare and Medicaid. Dr.
Wow.
Oz, who was hawking God knows what pills on his show, and, happy pills, or anyway, Dr. Oz is now going to run Medicare and Medicaid. So that's scary. But, it seems to me people need to find the intersection between all these things: Gaza, the climate inferno, police brutality. At some point, we're all protesting over and over and over again, and not much is changing. In fact, it's getting worse. George Floyd protests a couple years ago, historic, millions of people, cross-generational, white, black, old, young, you name it. Biden gave police more money. And people have been out in the streets for over a year. We've been covering them more than anyone else. They're doubling down, not just physically doubling down on the bombs, but doubling down on defending it, as we just showed you, and nothing's changing. So I really hope, as a response to this election, organizers and activists, and you dabble in activism, you talk to activists. Obviously, a lot of my sources for stories we cover are activists. I really hope there's some reflection in the activist community, and this isn't me lecturing. This is genuinely, I hope, that maybe we need to change up the tactics here. Maybe we need to look at other countries and how they protest, i.e. France, Paris, Yellow Vest, because these things are going to keep happening. Right now, it's Gaza. There'll be another country we're bombing and starving before you know it. The climate, obviously right now you have people who don't believe their eyes or are just denying it in terms of the climate inferno, and they're going to make it worse. But I don't really think protesting in the streets anymore is going to make shed a difference. I think we need to get a lot more aggressive. and a lot more strategic in terms of how we protest, including economic protest, as you and I have talked about a lot. But your final thoughts on this, because as the merry-go-round of Trump picks come into play, as Trump gets in there and starts pretty much from day one, there's rumors he's going to, as we're going to talk about next, basically do away with the Fed or fold it into the Treasury, court-martial past generals. It's going to be very hard to get attention on anything else, really, other than the day-to-day Trump insanity. But I really hope people remember, like, there's a real-time, I mean, our audience does, but the masses, there's a real-time genocide happening for no apparent reason. To be clear, even like war hawks in Israel, Netanyahu fired his defense secretary, Israel's version of defense secretary, who's a war hawk, who loves killing Arabs, because he was saying this needs to stop. That's Gallant. He was saying there's no strategic military reason to be in Gaza anymore. IDF was saying that. And this isn't me puffing up. I'm saying even the worst of the worst were saying this months ago. But somehow, I don't know if somebody has something on Biden. I don't really know the political or moral reasons to continue this. I don't see it changing much under Trump. But I hope the masses really change tactics, because we've seen the protests die down here in America. Even John Farina, there's less protests to cover. And I get it. I mean, it gets repetitive. It gets, after a while, we're not changing anything. The bombs are still dropping. The kids are still missing, being maimed. People are still dying. So maybe need to change the tactics. Your last thoughts on this?
Well, my last thoughts are, it's not that the tactics are not working. It's the numbers aren't there. You got to realize that we are filled with normie Dems, regular normie Dems that feel like any kind of resistance is radical. And they genuinely talk a good game, but they are terrified of doing anything other than going to the voting booth and putting a sticker on their forehead. And so the small number of people that are actually out there in the streets and doing stuff feels like a lot when you're there, feels like a lot when you look at it on TV, but in reality is a very, very small amount of people. And you look at the union movement, we've talked about it frequently on my own programs, and you've covered it extensively as well. Even with the union efforts that you see going on, the numbers are infinitesimal and they're tiny. And that's why I was saying, don't get too hyped about this stuff, because while the unions are trying, they're not there yet. In fact, you see stuff going on right now with the airline attendants once again. Another thing going on where they just don't have the numbers. So hopefully all those different airline unions come together and build some power as well. But Jordan, I'm just telling you right now, there are people that when you tell them how horrible the genocide is, they'll go, yeah, it's really, really bad. And you're like, well, what are you willing to do to stop it? And you're like, well, what do you think? Voting for Trump will make it better? So, no, I didn't say anything about that, you asshole. By the way, asshole. No, I didn't say that, asshole. But the fact is that this is the finite amount of space in the brain that they have to think about these problems. So we have to understand that we are very, very small minority of people, that most average people don't even know there's a genocide going on. They barely even realize, oh, Israel's defending itself is about the only thing they know. And so as much as it feels like it's big and we're all in it and we do care, the people that are there do care, the numbers are so small because the Democratic Party still has a lock on a lot of people's brains, and the mainstream media and The View and Rachel Maddow and all the rest of the fools out there that carry the water for these idiots, they have literally kept everyone in the dark. And that's the untouched people, the people that don't hear programs like this, that don't get involved in any way. They think they're voting their way to the promised land, and they don't want to be bothered with stupid talk of genocide. That's nothing to them, because what do you want? This has been going on forever, hasn't it? And that's the standard narrative. So, Jordan, I'm telling you right now, our problem isn't tactics so much as it is we've got to recognize that the left hasn't had a voice in this country in 50 years. In 50 years, it's been squashed to death, and resuscitating it and building power outside of these structures meant to kill movements is a must. We must build power outside of the electoral system. Anyway,
and I think as we go forward, and it's not going to be the sexiest topic, it's not going to be reacting to every crazy Trump thing, but we're going to have to hear on Status Coup actually look into that. How does that look? We could keep talking about, building outside of electoral politics. But how do we do that? Talk to labor leaders, talk to protest type leaders. We should also talk to folks who have done it elsewhere across the pond. How do you do it outside of electoral politics? Because this merry-go-round that we've been on, I don't know when you started Real Progressives. I've been doing this basically since 2016. Yeah, so we've been basically doing it, this type of work, the same amount of time, and it's just kind of Groundhog's Day, election to election. The sugar high, or the peak of the roller coaster. Bernie Woodstock, then the drop and the deflated balloon feeling. But the common denominator is neoliberalism. I do think the 40-year neoliberal bubble is popping, but
yes,
capital stays in power. And we continue protesting in the streets, but not doing anything more than that. And when I say more than that, I don't mean get violent. What I do mean, though, is get aggressive. And that starts with our economic power, our economic leverage, which we're not using at all. Protesting Amazon for a day ain't going to cut it. Boycotting Amazon for a day is not going to cut it. Continued protests in the streets, it's nice for awareness. Yes, there are power in numbers. If you had 20, 30,000 people in the streets, that makes a big difference. But it's hard to get 200 people in the streets these days for anything.
Yep.
And by the way, just to answer to this person, Susan, what climate inferno? I don't know where you live, but it was 70 degrees on Halloween where I live. It's seasonably warm where in the Northeast. There's wildfires right now in New Jersey and parts of upstate New York. I don't know if you notice what's going on in the west of America or the rest of the world. So if you want to live in your little bubble there, enjoy it. Hope the fire doesn't burn down your house. I digress. New members, welcome. New Status Coup members, Charles and Aaron. Really appreciate it. Steve, we're pushing hard. We're pushing hard because I am not ashamed to say this vehicle's this vehicle's misfiring. Our tire, one or two tires are flat. This vehicle, meaning me, I'm burnt the fuck out. I am burnt the fuck out. We need help. We need to grow. I'm sure you've been there. We've talked offline about. I mean, this line of work, whether it's activism, educational content, or journalism, if you're basically doing the job that normally 4 or 5 people would be doing, not for a month, but for like years, it kind of gets to you at a certain point.
Real quick, one thing that I think is lost on people, and I know it was lost on me, but if you just do small things, even a little small thing that you plan together in solidarity, that's building power, right? And like, even within our own organization, we're like, guys, we release our podcast Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Can you please sometime in the Saturday morning time frame simply retweet our tweet of our podcast? Can you just help us get past the algorithms? Do this simple thing. And you look down at the retweets and the likes and you realize 3/4 of them didn't even listen. So when we talk about the urgency, it's the small thing. We can't get big things done because we can't get small things done. And people think somebody else is going to do it. This is bystander syndrome. And somebody else will do it. It's not that big a deal. Oh, who cares if I did the thing? But it's that little act of solidarity, that little bit of saying, okay, I'm going to do this to help. I'm going to hit like and retweet and go about my day. That small little thing is one step toward building power, ironically. And I didn't realize how important that was, but it is super important.
Yeah. And, for me, and sorry to pivot here and get off course, but I think it's important. For me, I got to be honest, at a certain point, you have to wonder, how important is the truth to people? I know that sounds profound or vague, but how important to audiences, to woke-minded people, meaning just people thinking, is the truth? Because it's just incredible to me. And I'm not like pointing out any specific outlets. It's incredible to me to see how certain outlets have such large numbers in audience and, paid subscribers or whatever. And a lot of that's algorithmic, and there's kind of shock jocks on the internet, and they give you popcorn and, food fights and, controversial hot takes. But in reality, I sit down and I watch them like, all right, maybe I'm missing something. I listen or I watch, and I'm like, this is horrible. I'm not learning anything.
Nothing.
These are the stupidest takes I've ever heard. This is the most absurd, substanceless, nonsensical, also often riddled with lies, stuff I've ever heard. Yet, like, you know, a 10-minute clip has like 3 million views versus we're doing real investigative journalism and fighting and clawing just to get enough money to hire like a part-time extra reporter, you know? So I guess for me, what I'm asking to the masses, if you actually want to continue learning about the corruption that's going on in this country, learning and being informed about the corporate sacrifice zones, there's only so far you can take it before you break down. I mean, Colin and I are two people, Ed and John Farina, who's our cameraman, but we're basically running a network with 2.5 people. John's a full person, but he's not involved in the content. He just does camera. So we need help. And like you said, if every single person retweets that's part of your network, that helps get the podcast. Well, if every single person, I mean, if you can't support us for $5 a month, okay, but I'm sure every single person could donate $2 or $3 a month. That goes a long way. That goes a long way. And you could become a member to us for as low as $5 a month, but you could also send a donation to us for as low as $2, $3 a month. That's statuscoup.com/donate. All right, Steve, something that's infuriated me, because it's very popular on the internet to just be 24/7 shit on the Dems. And those outlets seem to kind of forget that Republicans are also awful. They don't believe in like walking and chewing gum at the same time. But it's always been incredible to me. It's really one of the greatest psyops in American history. I covered Trump in 2016. I covered Trump in 2020, 2024. 16, I covered the most rallies. 2020, covered a lot of rallies for Trump. It's always been incredible to me how many of Trump's supporters actually believe that this guy is anti-establishment. And I'm not like knocking them. A lot of them are good people. A lot of them aren't. But a lot of them are susceptible to this because of everything we talk about all the time. Democrats are awful, have abandoned them, abandoned the working class, sold their jobs offshores. Very easy to be, hoodwinked by a huckster. But it's always been incredible to me. How is it that a billionaire who's gone bankrupt so many times, who infamously doesn't pay people, stiffs his employees, has, makes his merchandise and shit in other countries off of foreign labor, whose greatest achievement has been, tax cuts for rich people. How did he, hoodwink or convince people that he's anti-establishment or that he's going to drain the swamp? Because one of his first appointments, if you remember, was appointing the head of ExxonMobil to be his Secretary of State, to appoint Steve Mnuchin, who was one of these sleazy bankers doing the, credit default swaps and all this. Didn't Kamala Harris could have prosecuted him because he illegally foreclosed on people after the financial crash. He filled the swamp. He built the swamp. Make America the swamp again. Might as well have been what it was. Okay. So, and even when I tepidly challenge these people, like, what do you mean he's anti-establishment? What do you mean? Like, he's for the workers? Like, can you tell me that in practicality? Because by who he's appointing, by who he's getting money from, he's the same old. He just sounds a little more populist. Well, looking at who he's considering for Treasury, we know about Matt Gaetz. We know about Tulsi Gabbard. We know about the Fox News host, which I'm still just couldn't believe for defense secretary. Who he's looking at for Treasury and who he just named as his commerce secretary sure seems like he's filling up the swamp again. These are not anti-establishment people. These are the very people that have been raiding the cookie jar that is all of us for the last 40 years. These are the very people who are responsible for that chart that we always show, with the red line moving up. So, Commerce Secretary, well, first, let's show you this. Meet the top 3 candidates Trump is considering for Treasury Secretary. He just named Howard Lutnick to be his Commerce Secretary. 2 Wall Street stalwarts, Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, were widely seen as the front runners. On Tuesday, Trump announced that Lutnick would lead the Commerce Department instead. It likely means the president-elect is narrowing down his choice for Treasury Secretary. Well, Lutnick if you want to know. Prominent Wall Street boss, Lutnick, has been one of Trump's biggest cheerleaders. This is the longtime CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. Was the, infamously, tragically lost, I think, almost 700 of its workers on 9/11. So this guy kind of got the Rudy Giuliani treatment, because of the tragedy. He was kind of puffed up, but he's pretty much a Wall Street sleazeball. Big crypto guy, if that tells you anything. And I love when Steve goes off on crypto. I'll tell you a little bit more about Mr. Lutnick here, because it doesn't seem like he's draining the swamp to me. Lutnick in August, this is the AOL article, Colin. Prominent Wall Street boss, Lutnick has been one of Trump's biggest cheerleaders. Trump and Lutnick's relationship spans decades. After 658 Cantor Fitzgerald's employees died at New York's World Trade Center, Trump, who headed Trump Organization, offered support to Lutnick because the CEO had to staff up and hire thousands at the brokerage. Lutnick is also a big supporter of cryptocurrencies, which Cantor Fitzgerald launching a financing business that provides leverage to investors who hold Bitcoin. Yeah, that sounds good. Here from the New York Post, Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick banks cryptocurrency Tether, despite its Hamas links. Howard Lutnick taking heat over the New York financial giant's massive investment in Tether, a cryptocurrency popular with terrorist groups, including Hamas. That's the New York Post write-up of it. And also, apparently, he's been under heat because he is Trump's transition chief, but a lot of his decisions that he's been making seem to be for his own benefit. Well, what do you know? Howard Lutnick, Wall Street CEO, heading up Trump's transition operation, is facing accusations from Trump insiders that he is improperly mixing his business interests with his duties, standing up a potential administration. The concerns were described by two people close to Trump, who said they have risen all the way to Trump himself. Lutnick, hold on. The most serious accusations involve Lutnick taking meetings on Capitol Hill as his role as transition co-chair, then allegedly using the opportunity to talk about matters impacting his investment firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, including high-stakes regulatory matters involving its cryptocurrency business. Doesn't really seem to be draining the swamp. Seems to be wanting to enrich himself. And by the way, that is one of the hallmarks. I don't use the F word much, fascist, even though I think Trump would like to be a fascist. But when you get these, strongmans like Trump, when you get kind of fascist or authoritarian regimes, one of the hallmarks, Steve, is they just loot the place for their own benefit. They're corrupt. There's plenty of money laundering. There's plenty of, government officials enriching themselves, backroom deals at the expense of us. It happened at the fall of the Soviet Union when America injected its capitalism into Russia. They looted the place. The oligarchs, Putin's people at the time, Yeltsin's, the remaining people under Yeltsin. So this is the guy that he just named Commerce Secretary. I mean, Cantor Fitzgerald is. We could go on for 2 hours. There's plenty of on the record of corruption, scams. This guy has been the CEO forever. I don't know, that he doesn't seem to be a man of the working class to me. He said some things about manufacturing jobs, bringing that back, but so is Trump. They haven't delivered on that. So it just seems to me, if you're MAGA watching, I'm not slamming you. I'm just wondering, where is the working class credentials here for the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald? And it sure seems to me he seems to be much more focused on crypto than bringing plants back to Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that'll seem like it's out of left field, but I assure you it's right on target. If you've been watching, Netflix has a show called Mr. McMahon. It's like a limited series.
Oh my God. I couldn't believe it, dude. I could not believe it. Go ahead.
It's worth the time to watch the show, not for entertainment purposes, although you might be entertained. But it really kind of demonstrates the masterful way that they play upon, if you hate them, they're happy. It works. It works for their messaging. If you love them, they love it. It works for their messaging. They don't care. Just pay attention to us, right? And the average person, and they explain this in vivid detail, before it had gone completely into this mature, rated X version of the wrestling world, it used to be the Iron Sheik. And you had Hulk Hogan, and you had them using America's going to come and, take care of the Iron Sheik. And they would be going, why do you, talking to little black kids, little white kids, whatever. Why do you not like the Iron Sheik? Because he's a foreigner. They literally played off this stuff, literally verbatim. And you say to yourself, well, how come people think Trump is the good guy or whatever? It's because he says the things that they would like to say. He calls people the things he'd like to do. People don't want to learn they, them pronouns. They don't want to learn these things. And for them, that's weird. And change is weird. And anything weird has got to be bad. Okay. So to them, Trump represents the WWF, an opportunity to express all their outrage at elite liberal, we're going to tell you how it is. We're going to tell you how to be. We're going to tell you how to walk and how to chew gum and how to do this and that and the other. And as a result of this, the rise of the quote unquote anti-woke movement, it's all, I was talking to a friend at work, and he's a nice guy. He really is. But all he could tell me was, my kids, they've been watching these internet things, these woke things, and now both my sons want to be gay because they've been watching this stuff on the internet. So we got to get rid of Harrison Biden. I need me Trump because, Trump won't put up with that stuff, and we don't have to hear that crap. And this is the level. It's not sophisticated. We're talking about policy wonks and technical details of Wall Street. They're like, I don't like hearing about that gay stuff. And it's not even necessary that they're bigots. They're scared to death. They don't know what the hell to do. All they know is that's not normal, and they don't have time for anything else. And that's what that Mr. McMahon show proved, that people at their most craven thing, these guys, why are they cheering Vince McMahon telling a woman to crawl like a dog on the stage and take off her clothes? Why? And they explained it perfectly in there. They're like, that kid is an incel. He will never, ever, ever get a hot looking woman. And so as a result of that, he hates women. So he's a misogynist now. And by watching Vince McMahon dress down this woman on stage, it allowed him to have a little moment of fuck you back, since he's not good enough for the girl, right? And you can think of that as Trump's MO. That is the entire, almost to a T. Now, about the crypto, I'm against crypto as a rule, but from a marketing standpoint, what Trump did was masterful. What he did was they created some shitty Trump coin, right? It's not going to take off or anything like that, but it's a signal, just like we're printing money. It's a signal. Well, he made his own little Trumpo coin, right? Now, all of a sudden, to the Bitcoin community, which has massive amounts of money, which this election was funded on the back of crypto, both Democrat and Republican. And by Trump leveraging that, he's telling them, hey, I'm one of you. So that whole community's like, hey, Trump's the guy that's going to go ahead and get the Fed to backstop crypto, to stabilize it, blah, blah, blah. He's making a part of it. Why? And this was the thing my friend Rowan Gray explained to me earlier today. He said, crypto, even though we think of it as international, crypto is really a beast of the United States. Once again, it's a way of flexing out U.S. muscle in this kind of empirical time. This is the U.S. once again taking over the world through a different avenue. And so it makes all the sense in the world that Trump would do this. And so people that are given to that, a lot of people made a lot of money real quick doing, a lot of people lost a lot of money too, but we don't hear about that. The people that made money, though, those people, they're the heroes. They're the exceptional person, just like the millionaires that support Harrison Biden. So it's a little bit of reverse psychology, but I think we're thinking too deeply about it. We're trying to make them care about these deep issues, when in reality, all they care about is they don't feel masculine enough because the woman doesn't want them, so they get to talk shit about it. They don't like the gay people because the gay people make them feel weird, so there's that. They're beating down the finances. On top of it, the economic situation was so bad under Biden, and everybody bragged about it. They talked about Wall Street, when in reality, people at the bottom are dealing with inflation. They're dealing with the loss of all the COVID payments, and they're dealing with student debt coming turned back on. So all this stuff is fighting against them, and the Democrats did shit to fix it. So naturally, Trump will suck that right up too.
I agree and disagree. I do think a lot of the crypto stuff, and I'm not an expert on crypto, but it's always kind of come across to me a bit scammy. But
Yep.
what I also think part of that, like, because crypto, a lot of it is this kind of like bro culture and masculinity, and it's been kind of put into that. I mean, remember the Super Bowl? It was just nonstop
yeah.
crypto ads. But
Nonstop.
I also think when, particularly men, when your wages have been stagnant for 50 years, I mean, all workers, but particularly the men, the factory floor workers, et cetera, when your productivity skyrockets, I mean, we show you the chart all the time. You know, the income inequality, the money skyrocketing to the top. There you go. That's the 0.01%. I think when you're economically not so stable, when you're economically don't have a lot of hope, when you're economically like, it's not like it used to be like, hey, if you keep doing better at your job, you'll be up for pay raises and performance bonuses and stuff like that. You're very susceptible to kind of these get rich quick schemes. And I'm not saying crypto is completely that, but crypto represents and has been marketed as kind of outside of the whole digital freedom thing. Crypto has been marketed as like a way to, take it to the capitalist elite and, get rich, this and that. And that's a very appealing message if you've been basically economically stuck or regressing for years and years and years. So I do think there is that cultural element that they're scared to death of changes and, diversity and gays. But I also think there's an element of like, hey, if you dangle a shiny, if you dangle, if you dangle digital Benjamins when people are working themselves to death and can't get ahead, it's definitely appealing. But overall, I mean, again, this doesn't seem like a drain the swamp pick to me for Commerce Secretary. This doesn't seem like somebody who's like tapping into like the resurgence of labor or wants to grow that. It just seems to me to be a swamp monster. And I just asked MAGA, this is not like me putting on Team Blue Hat. I mean, I voted for Jill Stein. They're all corrupt.
Right.
I can't stand any of these people. But MAGA has to have a come to Jesus moment because you keep voting for not just this guy, but you keep buying into this movement when underneath the cultural grievance that Steve just talked about, there's nothing there economically. Like that chart is not reversing. It didn't reverse under Trump, and it's not going to reverse under Trump 2.0. It's going to get worse. And the people he's appointing.
I'm just letting you know, because these are some things that you can easily predict that are going to come. Trump, they're talking about the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency or whatever, right? And they're talking about slashing like 80 agencies. Well, 80 agencies, that's a lot of employees, and a lot of employees, probably many of them are Republican even, right? And you figure that a lot of that is brand new money spent into the economy. So once you tie that up, and then Trump said, I want to bring interest rates down, which is fantastic on so many levels from a debtor's perspective, from a little man perspective. However, that money interest level was an input into the economy, more money going into the economy. Okay, so you cut away the jobs that they're going to slash through the DOGE thing or whatever recommendations they come up with, and then you look at the cutting of the interest income channel. All this money is going to rich people. I want to be clear; it's not benefiting the working class, but it is money. Those people still spend money. It still trickles, very much like urine on your head, but it trickles down. But cutting that off, it's like austerity. So what are they going to do? They're going to fill that bucket with tax cuts. And once those tax cuts hit in, you may not think it's a big deal, but if he lowers interest rates, that's going to make things far more affordable instantly just by lowering interest rates, and then add in a tax cut. And that's almost as good as giving more money to people, because it is giving more money to people. And this is what he did last time. And people couldn't understand how Donald Trump's shitty handout to the rich, they never paid attention to the little teeny scraps he was throwing the working class. And those little scraps meant everything to those people, and they remember it. Democrats have resisted tax cuts. They've acted like we can't do that because they're so worthlessly hell-bent on taxes fund spending. They're full of shit, but you get it. So because of that, they're like, we're going to bankrupt the government. How can we do this? Trump is sitting there saying, I don't give a fuck. We're going to slash these things. We're going to cut that, but he's going to cut in taxes. Once he does that, the people are going to say, I'm breathing again. You lowered costs, you lowered the price of living, and you also lowered my tax outlay.
Well,
Life is good.
Here's the problem. I don't really, I mean, unless he goes full strongman and does what Biden wouldn't, which is threaten the companies.
I'm sure he will.
I don't know about that. I don't know how he's going to really lower costs, not the cost of borrowing. I mean, the cost of gas, of groceries, of electric, of utilities, of healthcare. I don't see how he's going to do that significantly. So you might get, crumbs of tax cuts, but I don't see how he's going to lower these costs, because a lot of the costs are just coming straight corporate price gouging. Is Trump going to go in there and actually use the tools of the federal government to lower the costs of things, or force the fossil fuckers or the grocers or the electric companies or the healthcare companies to lower their costs? I mean, I don't see that happening.
We have a climate crisis, but guess what? The United States is a net producer, a net exporter, a net creator of fossil fuels. We are no longer dependent on OPEC with the fracking and everything else. And look at what Trump's doing with fracking. He already picked somebody out there that's super fracmo, right? So the U.S. has the ability to offset fuel prices, and watch him do it, just to stick it to people, to say, see, fuck you. Look, I hate Trump for a number of reasons, not the least of which is all the shit that he's done to people that are disabled and so forth, and having to live with people at a WWF screaming at him, teasing him, taunting him, and letting shit out that was properly kept within. And now it's just sort of release the freaks, right?
Yeah.
That is probably the worst thing that he's done. But when you look at this, you've just got to be honest with yourself. I'm not telling you he's good or anything like that. I'm merely telling you that these things have real impact on working people. When he cuts taxes, that's a real benefit to that family, whether we realize it or not. And that is one of those things where they will remember that. And if he releases the fuel in our reserves to offset, to flood the market, to bring prices down, he could do that. And he's the kind of guy that might be willing to do that.
But the other thing, and this is the other point of that, and his base is some of the people that will feel this. He's going to cut taxes. Again, proportionally, it's going to be 7 slices for the rich, 1 slice for the peasants. But to cut taxes, he's also going to cut all this. They're already talking about cutting SNAP, Medicaid, a lot of other programs that are no longer just for the poor, the poorest of the poor. I mean, middle class people are more and more depending on what's left of the middle class, are more and more depending on this. So also, I mean, unless he just totally goes strongman and gets rid of the Fed's independence, which there's technically laws against that, but who knows if laws actually will stop this. I don't know if he could just unilaterally lower the interest rates to what they should be. We'll see. But what I do see here is why, my guiding principle, Steve, in anything, yes. I don't care what they say. I care who people get money from and who they surround themselves with. He's surrounding himself with people that
don't
want to do the things you're talking about. So to me, if he's surrounding himself, and we haven't even gotten to the 2 for Treasury, if he's surrounding himself with Wall Street swamp monsters, they're not exactly, Trump listens to the last person in the room. I don't think they're going to be focused on, they're going to be focused on tax cuts, but last time it was 84% tilted to the rich. Trump's not running for re-election, or at least we think he's not going to try to serve more than 2 terms. I think it's going to be even more jilted. I think the tax cuts are even going to be smaller for the peasants, i.e. what he considers his base. I think they're going to go way further than just Medicaid and SNAP, and they're going to cut a lot of programs that affect, not just the poorest among us, working class, blue collar. I think it's very possible they just do away with the National Labor Relations Board, who, by the way, Elon Musk, SpaceX, is in court right now trying to get the National Labor Relations Board to be declared unconstitutional. That's not, there's a lot of union members that are MAGA. Not going to go over well. But I want to get to these 2 others, because in addition to the swamp monster, the Wall Street person he just named to be his commerce secretary, it seems like it's down to 2 for his treasury secretary. We know he had Steve Mnuchin the first time, who illegally foreclosed on people. Well, he's also considering Kevin Marsh, longtime Morgan Stanley executive, who then became the youngest Federal Reserve Board governor. And Mr. Marsh, boy, seems to his modus operandi seems to be the opposite of Steve Grumbine's modus operandi. Colin, play that clip from Fox Business. This is Kevin Marsh. Again, longtime Morgan Stanley exec, then became a Fed guy, and has been obsessed like a fetish on inflation forever and ever.
All this government spending, the Fed essentially using QE and zero rates, I think this is what you're saying, they enabled the spending to become inflation. Is that fair?
That's fair. There was a time, this wasn't a very controversial statement I was making. There was a time that we thought that, hey, the Fed's responsible for inflation. Inflation's a choice of the central bank. But somehow in the recent decade, we've confused who sets monetary policy and who makes price stability. It's the Federal Reserve. That doesn't mean fiscal policy doesn't matter, Larry. Of course it does, especially when the Fed is buying more than half of the debt that's coming from the Treasury to facilitate that spending.
I have made that point. It's funny, nobody wants to look at the inflation in monetary terms. There has never, look, Milton Friedman was right.
No, he wasn't.
60, 70, I don't know how many years ago. You're not going to have a big inflation that's not monetary induced, one way or the other. And you're bringing that argument back. It's not just about pandemic stuff. It's not just about supply chains and supply shortages. They are pouring money, excess bank reserves, consumer deposits are soaring. And the funny thing is the private sector doesn't even want this stuff. They're trying to give it back.
So we shouldn't be surprised. It's the strongest economy of our lifetime. Nominal growth is in the teens. We have the loosest monetary and fiscal policy in the history of the world. And yet we've been puzzling for a year about why prices keep going up. I just tried to do a little bit of unlearning a balderdash in this journal, try to just state plainly where things are. And listen, you and I care about the institution. We care about the Fed.
Enough.
And if they can get this right.
So, yeah, this guy seems to be, big government spending is driving up the prices, not all the corporations illegally price gouging. Not the 40-year inflation called gentrification, not real estate developers purchasing our local government so that they could fucking just, drive up prices of housing and all this. I knew I was going to get you when he, kind of gave a wet sexual favor to Milton Friedman there.
Well, first things first, there's a lot of people probably listening to the show even, and forgive me, folks, because I'm going to be brutal. There is no more stupid thing. The dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life, because you have to be an idiot to think it, is that by the government spending money, it creates inflation. That's the first thing these fucktards said. I mean, idiot, savant, dumbest fucking, like the worst. Like, you talk about the thing that will make me break out a billy club and just start cracking. I mean, the idea that spending money creates inflation is the dumbest fucking thing. The idea that, oh, they've expanded the money supply, it creates inflation. Again, the dumbest, most moronic, stupid, worthless, dumb fuck thing a person could say. Okay. And this is part and parcel with the crypto world, right? They've created artificial scarcity, this false scarcity for this asset. And they transfer it to the dollar because they're still living in a gold standard world. They don't understand how a fiat system works. And because they don't understand that, and because people listen to this idiotic shit and repeat it at the dinner table and at the water cooler, and they act like they're really smart sitting there at the fire pit drinking a fucking Milwaukee's Best while they're talking about fucking inflation and printing money, right? This is the kind of stupid shit that really will fuck us all, okay? Because the idea of cutting government spending is beyond the dumbest thing ever, right? All money starts at the government. All debt, all private debt starts as a bank loan. That's it. So you're either getting money spent into the economy directly from the currency issuing federal government, or you're taking out a fucking loan. That's it. That's the two ways money gets in there. And this guy is parroting the same idiotic, long debunked Milton Friedman shit. And people don't take the time to really learn it and understand it. The fact is, if the government decides that they bought a hammer yesterday for $2 for a hammer, but today they've decided they're going to pay $5 a hammer, guess what's going to happen? Hammer prices at the base level are going to go up to $5 a hammer because the government is the currency issuer. It is also by default the nominal price setter. And when it spends money on something, it sets the price, at least at the bare base wholesale price going out the door. So all this shit that they're talking about is speaking to crypto people. It's speaking to the moronic group that wants that false scarcity because they think that somehow or another, the dollar is a speculative asset. Well, it's not. It's a fucking tax credit. In the United States government unit of account, it's an inch, a pound, whatever. And so when you hear this shit, unfortunately, I wish that it was just Republicans that thought this stuff. I wish that they were I could point at them and say, see, they're the dum-dums. But it's not just them. We got people on the left. We got people talking about the same shit from Jimmy Dore's group, from all the other fucking podcasters out there that don't know anything but still platform this kind of economic bullshit. And they end up parroting it back and saying it again and talking to each other. And it's like a fucking virus. Okay. The only way that you have inflation is that people raise prices. Okay, they choose to raise prices. Why would someone raise prices because they printed money? Oh, because they think you have more money to spend, right? I mean, that might be one thing, but it's not some God-breathed thing. Oh, they printed money. It's got to be inflationary. The dollar is worth $1 in tax credit, period, 1 for 1. So every time somebody says this, a baby dies somewhere because it's that stupid. Okay. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if they do pursue this kind of stuff, right, the only good news is that it will hurt enough people that I don't think people will tolerate it, right? That's the only good news about what they're doing, is that kind of thing will really hurt people,
right?
And hopefully they'll fight back.
Well, I want to read more about this anti-establishment warrior for the working class, Kevin Warsh, Washington Post. It's true that some of our best central bankers haven't had PhDs in economics, but that wasn't Warsh. They're talking about his appointment. He was the youngest person appointed to the Federal Reserve, or as a Federal Reserve governor. His specialty was seeing inflation problems that didn't exist. He warned about inflation in 2006 when excluding volatile food and energy prices. It was just 2.1%. Then he warned again in 2007 when it was 2% by the same measure. And again in 2008, when core prices were rising a relatively non-threatening 2.3%, going so far as to say that was, quote, still not ready to relinquish my concerns on the inflation front the day after Lehman Brothers failed. But here's the kicker. What Warsh wasn't worried about, though, were all the risks banks had been taking that would ultimately require them to be bailed out. A few months before the credit crunch began in 2007, Warsh even said that an important source of strength has been financial innovation, highlighting the benefits of credit default swaps and other derivatives that Warren Buffett would go on to call financial weapons of mass destruction. So this guy sees inflation coming out of every closet. And he apparently loved the financial innovation, which was, all the Wall Street banks fucking you and yours, selling you that fucking charcoal burnt, scam home mortgages that they knew were fraudulent. They knew you couldn't pay, but boy, were they going to take you to the bank and then throw you out of your homes. Maybe he didn't know that was going to happen, but I have a feeling he was smart enough to know credit default swaps. These things are kind of predatory. So that's him. He's in the running to be Treasury Secretary. And then the second guy is Mark Rowan. He is the longtime head of Apollo Global, which is like the go-to private equity firm. Oh my God, they have donated so much fucking money to Hillary Clinton, to Trump. I mean, both parties. They've given a shit ton of money to, and their kind of specialty is like the Mitt Romney thing, just buy up companies, just drown them in debt, and then sell off the parts so they can make money. But they also had some ties to one Jeffrey Epstein. This from The Hill. Billionaire Leon Black's $158 million payment to Jeffrey Epstein sparks Senate investigation. Leon Black was Mark Rowan. He's being considered as for Trump's Treasury Secretary's co-founder of Apollo Global. The Senate Finance Committee announced Tuesday that this is in the past. announced Tuesday that it's conducting an investigation into billionaire and Apollo Global Management co-founder Leon Block's financial ties with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently, the investigation's findings allegedly include a transaction Epstein devised to help Black avoid more than $1 billion in federal taxes raises. I'm sure his partner, Mark Rowan, knew nothing about any of this, these ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And then I want to read this because this is really disgusting. This is from the American Prospect. They do good work. The moral authority of Mark Rowan. The private equity billionaire is leading a boycott of an Ivy League oligarch factory over a Palestinian literary festival it held last month. But just stick with me because this shows you this is the predator Trump would appoint as Treasury Secretary. 2 weeks ago, I happened to have a long chat with a nurse whose hospital is owned by the $500 billion private equity empire Apollo Global Management. I met this nurse, whose gender I'm withholding due to their fear of retaliation, at the height of the pandemic, when they were terrified that the extreme cutbacks Apollo had imposed on staffing budgets were risking patient safety or even contributing to preventable death in the hospital's isolated rural community. 3 years later, this nurse is largely preoccupied with their own basic survival. A virulent infection contracted during a routine surgery last year left them unable to walk without pain, and they walked 12,000 steps during an average shift. The nurse knew it was unwise to undergo surgery in their own hospital, the one that Apollo Global owns, where there was well-documented history of abysmal sanitation practices. The lone sterile technician on staff seemed to never leave the hospital, and corporate is so behind on its bills, they had almost entirely eliminated the weekend housekeeping staff and were chronically short on basic supplies like IV tubing. But at some point following a restructuring 2 years ago, Apollo outsourced its health insurance administration to a company that placed onerous restrictions and pre-authorization requirements on care received outside of Apollo. Steve, in English, Mark Rowan, who might be the next Treasury Secretary, runs the sleazy corporate criminal cartel that buys up the hospitals, whittles it down to the bone. You got one nurse for 7 patients, lays off nurses. You don't have the proper equipment, and this kills people. I've covered nurses' strikes over these shortages of workers, these unsanitary and unsafe conditions, because you got private equity ghouls like Mark Rowan buying up these hospitals and then whittling it down to the bone. And he's going to be Treasury Secretary. Let's put aside whatever their relationship was with Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know, Steve. We could shit on the Democrats all day, and I love it. But please explain to me, MAGA, how is this draining the swamp? How is this draining the swamp?
It's not. I mean, it's smoke and mirrors. I mean, again, it's all the visceral stuff that people get off on that are buying into it. Do you understand what I mean? The owning shit libs is all the rage. That's the level of understanding. That's the level of political
and
or economic wherewithal.
Men at birth, they're playing in female sports. Meanwhile, he's loading the treasury. He's looting the treasury and the Commerce Department. And by the way, I left out, breaking news, he was going to appoint Dr. Oz to run Medicare and Medicaid. You know how Trump said, no, we're going to protect Medicare and Medicaid. We're not going to cut Social Security. Dr. Oz is a champion of privatizing Medicare.
Absolutely.
MAGA, I'm sorry. Yes. You got every reason to hate the Democrats. You got every reason, to want to vote in protest, try something different. But this ain't it. He got you. He conned you. Go ahead.
But I'll just say this. So much of what we're talking about with MAGA is so much what we have with the Democrats as well. Like there's a veneer of we're doing the same shit. We're giving rich people stuff. We're hurting the poor and we're giving rich people stuff. The difference is KFAB, which is the narrative. Are we going to go ahead in character and be like we're owning shit libs? Does that get these people off that aren't paying attention, don't know it? All that treasury stuff doesn't mean nothing to me, man. I just want you to get these people from making my son gay. I don't want my son gay, right? Whatever. This is the level. I'm telling you, I talk to people in this area. I live in Pennsylvania, and people all over the place went out of the normal sphere of work. This is what they're saying. This is what they say. It's like amazing to me that this is what they say, because genuinely all the things you're talking about, all the things we're talking about MMT, we're talking about, we can fix everything, man. The government could spend it into existence and fix blah, blah, blah. They don't care. They don't hear it because it doesn't mean anything to them. It's not real. It's too detailed. It's too much information. All they know is that they're at a WCW Nitro or a Monday Night Raw wrestling match, getting ready to scream at the television, scream at the guy in the ring. And that's the beginning and the ending of a huge amount of people's political analysis. And it's sad because it's not an unintentional. I mean, our education system has failed us. Democrats have made it so that people like that exist because they've been so feckless. And so they see someone like a Donald Trump, as shitty as he is, and you see what he's doing. You see because you have eyes to see. But because they don't, they just see him sticking it to the shit libs that are fucking up their version of what they think America is. It doesn't mesh with that country song. Okay. It doesn't mesh with these colors don't run. You just hate America. I gave an oath to defend this country. I fought over there. I did that. And it's this mindset. And I'm telling you right now, it's an identity. You talk about true identity politics. It's an identity, and that identity is stronger than facts. It's a post-facts world. And that identity is the thing that we've got to break. I've been telling people in my own sphere, look, we need to be giving people an awakening, not just an education. Education, these people are tuning out. It's the awakening that they need to see, that they are being shit on by both. If it helps them to see that it's not Democrats or Republicans, it's the entire capital order. If you can pull them out of red and blue and make them think as working class, we have a shot. But that has got to be the focus. And I don't think it ever will, because I think people really, really love their red and blue and whatever. And that identity outweighs Gaza, outweighs tax cuts, outweighs who they're putting in the Fed, outweighs anything. And as long as you allow my crypto to go up or whatever, I love you. And that's what beginning and ending. And until we can break that mental lock, you're always going to be wondering what the hell they're thinking this draining of the swamp is, because they aren't thinking about that at all. They just think shit libs. I got shit libs out of there that are telling me to use weird pronouns. I'm telling you, I wish it were more sophisticated. I really do.
I think you're 40-50% right. I think the other 50% is, again, when you have been economically abandoned for so long.
Yes.
Most people don't have time.
Big time.
Most people don't have time to look into these treasury or cabinet officials. And Trump is a good salesman, and he convinces a lot of people. So I think it's a mix of both. Steve, tell the masses where they can find your great work, because we got to end soon.
Yep. So please check out our website. It is back up. It had been down for a couple months. It's realprogressives.org. We do a podcast, goes out every Saturday morning, called Macro and Cheese. Tonight, every Tuesday night, after I do this show with Jordan, we have a webinar called Macro and Chill, which is where we get together as a group of people. And that means you all are invited. Come check out Macro and Chill. We'll talk, we'll listen to the podcast together, and we'll have discussions. And also check us out on Substack, realprogressives.substack.com.
Thank you, kind sir. Good to be back with you. And I think we're going to have to, in these trying times, have a little bit more Grumbine. And we're going to have more guests on with Steve to focus on, what do we do outside of this fucking horrid cesspool of an electoral system? How do we actually leverage power? How do we organize? So we'll talk about that, Steve. Thank you.
Sounds good, man. Take it easy, everybody. Thanks.
Let me read super chats here. Thank you very much. Phased, $10. Remember when Dems were up in arms about social media and were adamant about making it the new public square? Biden wins and they promptly dropped it and support it's private so they could do whatever they want. I do remember that. Thank you, Teresa, 273, $20 super chat. Yay, Steve Dow, Blackberry White, right on with your appointees. Denise Columbia, $5. Lefties going to have to start homeschooling their kids to avoid religious indoctrination and access real history. Oh, God. Oh, you might be right. Super chat, Teresa, $10. Steve, you are absolutely right, and I keep hoping Rogue Scholar comes back. But if you're a Tuesday regular on Status Coup, that works too. Denise, another $10. Dude, the subject matter alone fries my brain fast. I have mad respect for you folks who make your living narsing out bad actors and terrible events. Why, thank you. Arlene, $10. It's a hot mess, Jordan and Steve, but therein lies our groundwork for a revolution and third parties. Thank you. $2, Kami John. God bless you, Steve Grumbine. I agree. And remember, folks, we really, I hate to be a broken record. If we don't grow our paid membership, it's hard to keep the lights on here. We have to grow, and we have to grow quicker. If you can, before the holiday season, support us. StatusCoup.com/join. StatusCoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month. That's 16 cents a day. If we could get a couple more, if we can get 1,000 more people to sign up at $5 a month, I could hire another reporter. It's really that simple. We need to be able to hire another reporter, another producer, and grow. We're kind of been, we're growing, but not quick enough to hire people at a decent wage, at a living wage, at above a living wage. And I need help. Colin needs help. If you want to see more investigative reporting, if you want to see us on the ground more and consistently, please support us, because at this point, we got to scale back the on-the-ground reporting if we don't grow. StatusCoup.com/join. If you're already a member, we always appreciate your donations. That's StatusCoup.com/join.